afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Please, I want to welcome everyone to this platform of our bi-weekly webinar, the platform of Center of Excellence in Migration and Global Studies of the National Open University of Nigeria. Our center is a fulcrum of evidence-based research about pressing and emerging migration challenges in Nigeria, Africa, and the globe. This is a research hub with emphasis on field-based research that imparts policy formulation and execution for solutions to both internal and global migration. So we've been on this for quite some time now, and every fortnight we bring you interesting topics that has come of many researches here and there. Today, I really welcome you to this another exciting presentation on behalf of my Vice Chancellor, who is unavoidably absent, the Vice Chancellor of the National Open University of Nigeria, Professor Olufemi Peters. I welcome you in a special way, and he's with us. His thoughts are always with us, and he could join us anytime from anywhere, so we are open to receive him. Today, we have a very eminent scholar with us, Father Thaddeus Ejiofor Eze, PhD, who is a Catholic priest of Nsukka Diocese, Nigeria. He studied philosophy and theology in Nigeria before his priestly ordination on 7th July 2007, that's 2007. Thereafter, he worked as Vice Rector and Dean of Studies at the Good Shepherd Seminary in Nsukka until January 2012, when he left for further studies in Germany. Between 2014 and 2020, he was a postgraduate student at Westfälische Wilhelms University, WWU, Münster, Germany, also known as University of Münster. Sorry, I hope I'm pronouncing it well. From where he backed both the Masters of Arts degree and Doctor of Philosophy degree in social anthropology at the Institute for Ethnology. He has done extensive ethnographic researches on migrant communities in Germany, that is particularly in terms of Africa, and has participated in a number of international conferences on the subject. His research interest is on migration and global studies. He currently works as pastor of a parish in the Diocese of Münster, Germany. We are very happy to have this reverend gentleman here with us, and today he is going to be talking to us about our cultures of migration, a hindrance to integration, a case study of Nigerian migrants in Germany. So I join everyone on this platform to welcome you, Father, to this beautiful presentation. And I know we'll be enlightened and well educated at the end of it all. You're welcome, Father. Over to you.
Thank you very much for the opening speech and the welcome. Thank you, all participants, and welcome to this interaction. As already shown on the screen, the topic of our discussion is cultures of migration, a hindrance to integration. We will use a case study of Nigerian migrants in Germany to attempt to answer this question. It's framed as a question because it's an ongoing research that is not yet concluded, but this interaction will help us to shape the direction of the research. I'll begin with a question. We all know this statement is a very popular statement: when in Rome, do as the Romans do. And if not, why not? When in Rome, do as the Romans do. I feel it's a good starting point for our discussion today on the integration of migrants and the importance of the cultural perspective in the discussion. Perhaps to help you think about the answer to this question, we'll look at the background to it. Is, as I said, is an anonymous. Nobody, we can't trace the originator of this statement. But we know that the first recorded use of this saying it was by St. Augustine of Hippo in AD 390. It was contained in a letter, in a correspondence he wrote to Januarius, the Bishop of Naples, while he was living in Milan. In the letter, he confessed, Augustine confessed to, or confesses to Januarius, he said, "When I go to Rome, I fast on Saturday, but here in Milan, I do not." Then he advises Januarius to follow the local custom if you do not want to give or receive scandal. So, moving from Milan to Rome, it changes the way he behaves. When in Rome, you do as the Romans do. How does that connect to what we're discussing today? It's an obvious fact that African migrants, especially those from the sub-Saharan region, and we know that majority of them are Nigerians, that they represent the archetypal immigrant group in Europe, especially in Germany. Besides their numerical disadvantage, because the Black population in Germany makes up just about 1% of the total population. So beside this numerical disadvantage, their distinct phenotypical otherness and cultural distance imposes on them an enduring marginal social status as group and as individuals in relation to the mainstream society, that is. So unfortunately, both indices are more or less overlooked in discourses and formulation of official government policies on the integration of migrants, because the focus is mainly on the macroeconomic framework. In Germany, as in most modern societies, integration of migrants is formally measured by macroeconomic benchmarks, namely language competence and upward labor mobility. For Germans, typically, a well-integrated migrant is one who speaks perfect Dutch, one who does not depend on social welfare, that is, one who is meaningfully employed. So other critical areas of social interaction at the micro level are largely skimmed out, which accounts for the wide disparity between official progress reports from government institutions and the concrete lived experiences of immigrants in their quotidian personal experiences of social integration. So we would like to use the concept of cultures of migration to consider migrants from the perspective of the complexities of their social representation, which they embody as carriers of cultures. We know that migrants do not move as tabula rasa. They have been socialized in particular cultures and social circumstances that shape their attitudes to issues, including migration. And they carry that into their host countries. So cultures of migration recognizes that the valorization of mobility in the societies of origin play an important role in migrants' decisions, dispositions, and approaches to the process of integration in the host society. Using materials from a long-term ethnographic research of Nigerian migrants in the city of Essen in Northern Westphalen, this paper tries to interrogate the influence of migrants' cultural background on their dispositions to and participation in the process of integration to the German society. We shall proceed this way. We will clarify the key concepts, especially migration, integration, and culture. Then we look at the comparative perspective on cultures of migration. Thereafter, we shall attempt a summary of the evolution of Germany's national integration policy as a prelude to our discussion of the narratives of Nigerian migrants about their experiences of social integration. And from there, we shall then outline some cultural attributes that we need to consider whether or not they constitute a hindrance to the effective social integration, which will then lead us then to the conclusion of our paper. What is migration? In our context, in the context of this discussion, we will use migration to refer to the physical movement of persons from one region to another for a relatively long period of stay. When such movement occurs across state boundaries, that is in this case from Nigeria to Germany, then the people. So we use this term as an umbrella term to describe all foreigners living in the country. And this, in the case of Germany, when they use migration or migrants, they use the word to, encapsulates the different categories of people, including people with migration background. And their definition of migration background is that one of your parents was not born in Germany. So, and it stretches up to the third generation. That's something specific to Germany. Then the word integration. We apply this concept broadly to describe the process through which foreigners become integral part of the host society. Etymologically, it means the act of bringing together the parts of a whole. Although methods and emphasis may vary across the sciences, the central question of integration remains how immigrants and their descendants can become active part of the host society and to what extent their participation is tolerated by the mainstream. To be effective, integration policies must do justice to three dimensions of migrants' experiences with the host society, namely social integration, economic integration, and identity integration. Ideally, effective integration recognizes and appreciates differences and allows for tolerance and mutual exchange in the three domains. Then we have culture. This term has been variously defined and is a very broad one and a very fluid one also, but we will use it here in a broad sense of worldview, collective representation of a people, including their social expectations. We shall adopt Martin and Nakayama's definition, which is closer to what we intend here, which says that culture, which refers to culture to include the ideas, customs, and social behavior of a particular people or society, learned patterns of perception, values, and behavior shared by a group of people that are dynamic and heterogeneous. And we move forward to this concept of cultures of migration, comparative perspectives in societies. In 2011, Jeffrey Cohen, I think the first edition was in 2004, he published his ethnography on migration in southern Mexico under the title Cultures of Migration, where he proposed the thesis that migratory movements are complexes of cultural representations. As a concept, cultures of migration is essentially a critique of what George Clute and Hans-Peter Hahn identified as the theological tendency in studies of mobility. That is, the tendency in migration studies to get fixated on the famous bipolar causation of migration as response to the so-called push and pull factors. The push factors are the circumstances that force people to leave their homeland. Then the pull factors are the circumstances that tend to attract people to particular destinations. So to this school of thought, migration and human movement are opposing values to stability and sedentary lifestyle. So there's this sharp discrepancy between stability or sedentary model of living and then migration. Recognizing cultures of migration, therefore, is to look outside this macroeconomic framework to the sociocultural connections to mobility, especially by considering the sociocultural valuations of movement and strangeness. This central argument is that migration is fueled by locally defined valuations of lifestyles and patterns of preferential strategies of survival. Therefore, the cause of migratory movements cannot be exhausted by the analysis of push and pull factors alone. It doesn't mean that we're not denying that they play a role, but that one has to look beyond that and then consider the migration movement from the emic perspective. So applying this concept to the African context, and include observes that the normative perspective on migratory movements, as the exception compared to sedentary ways of life, obviously contradicts the reality of many peoples and groups, particularly on the African continent. Africans move a lot and for various reasons. Looking at the high degree of mobility in many parts of Africa, it has been argued we would consider mobility and not sedentary ways of life as African normality. Whereas from a European standpoint, migratory phenomena seem to disturb order, so that many efforts are employed in order to send migrants back at worst or to integrate them at best. Mobility and movements of people are since long part and parcel of the African reality. Indeed, migration in its various forms are not new. It's not new to Africa. And most African cultures value migration and not just normal experiences of life, but desirable for the wholeness of society. The history of African societies could be called a history of migration because mobility has long characterized it from the ancient times. Traditional African legends and folktales are filled with rich accounts of migration trajectories of various peoples. Great heroes and powerful medicine men, for instance, are ones who successfully traversed several evil forests and crossed dangerous rivers to achieve success. And many extant tribal myths of origin trace people's roots to yonder lands and kingdoms. Let's consider, for instance, the three major ethnic groups in Nigeria, the Hausa, the Igbo, and the Yoruba, and their myths of origin as demonstrations of the case in point. The Hausa Fulani ethnic group traces its ancestral roots to Arabia in the Middle East. The Yoruba claims that the founder of his nation was Oduduwa, who migrated from the land of Egypt, whereas the Igbo claim that it originated from one of the lost tribes of Israel. Now, of relevance here is not the historical accuracy of such claims, but their anthropological significance. Moreover, the principle of socio-cosmological diarchy operative in most traditional African societies distinguishes between descendants of autochthonous ancestors and those of immigrant ancestors. The former being the owners of the land, the custodians of earth goddess, and the latter being performers of political and military functions. There are remarkably comparable models across other traditional societies. For instance, the Igbo and the Akan-speaking societies in West Africa, they share striking similarities with those of the Austronesian speakers in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. Then there are common values, such as the obligation to support members of the mothers and the wives' patrilineages in the domains of education, farming, and trade, in the reciprocal exchange and redistribution of wealth, and the participation of life cycle rituals. The classificatory use of sibling terms, for instance, nwanne in Igbo, entails norms of solidarity to be applied to other persons, both close and distant kin, biologically related as well as non-related, at home and abroad, to whom one owes reciprocal support. Furthermore, the myth of origin codifies of the traditional pattern of social organization and the inner logic of social relationship among the federating parts of a given society. In effect, the principle of cosmological equilibrium of every community is subtly embossed in the internal logic of the myth, which is based on mutual complementarity. A mechanism of checks and balances is therefore built into the system to ensure harmony, fairness, and justice among the federating units and people. For instance, this plays role in the appointments of and confirmation of different offices in the land. So there exists in most traditions this diarchic cosmological organization of society, which accords differential but complementary statuses to autochthones and foreigners respectively. So accordingly, most African societies valorize foreigners, foreign objects, and foreignness as necessary complement to the autochtonic status. In some studies have shown that in traditional African societies, migrants and refugees have been valued as sources of new knowledge, new skills, and resources, and migration is valued as a source of social and cultural capital. These values belong to the cultural repertoire of migrants originating from these societies, which definitely influence their perceptions and actions in the host society or in their destination countries. Interestingly, this is not peculiar to Africa. In a joint publication entitled Integrating Strangers' Perspectives from Elsewhere, an international group of anthropologists with research experiences in societies of the Canadian Arctic, Africa, Asia, Oceania, and Southern Europe addressed the question of how they were received in societies among whom they had lived and worked over a long period of time as migrant ethnographers. Their writings provide a very illuminating insight into the evaluation of people on the move as migrants and strangers in different societies. What is most significant in their accounts is that despite the variations in individual societies, these accounts acknowledge the positive and complementary significance of the stranger to the cosmological completeness of each society. However, each society outlines the modes of engagements through which strangers may be incorporated in her midst, how they will be admitted, what roles they will play, and what status they will occupy in order to effect cosmic harmony. In none of these cases reported was a macroeconomic factor, a decisive index of integration. Rather, a cosmological immersion was as a necessary requirement. The stranger must be brought into a cosmological relationship with the ancestors as the owners of the land before he or she becomes a full member of society. Therefore, the transcendental index of differentiation between insider and outsider, exclusion or inclusion of members of a society lies at the cosmological level, which marks the deepest level of identification. The legal provisions of the state have little or no contribution in this regard. Note that such differentiation, rather than being a discriminatory practice, is indeed a sign of affirmation of the foreign provenance of the stranger on the one side and the autochthonous status of the indigenes on the other, which translates into a relationship of complementarity that make for the wholeness of the community. Plattenkamp argues that notwithstanding the great cultural diversity between traditional societies and the idea recalls that strangers are not expected to renounce their foreign provenance. On the contrary, this provenance may qualify them to mediate the society's relationships with the outside world and proclaim on its behalf its renown, achievements, and virtues beyond the borders, so that the estimation of the world, in the estimation of the world at large, the whole society can reflect the accomplishments of its own civilization. The fact that such taxes are imposed upon the stranger not only testifies that these societies' confidence in their own, the society's confidence in their own cultural identity, but also to the importance attached to other societies' assessments of that identity. The presence of strangers in societies are valued, therefore, as necessary complement to the wholeness of the society in question. We shall keep these alternative perspectives in mind as we turn to the German policy of social integration and the experiences of Nigerian immigrants thereof. Evaluation of the stranger in Germany, the evolution of integration policy. Among the EU countries, Germany was a latecomer, or is a latecomer to the business of formulating a national integration policy. This is a paradox, considering her long history of migration, which was especially remarkable in the years following the Second World War, when millions of guest workers were recruited to meet the enormous labor demands of the era of the economic miracle. But even before the war years, Germany has been a destination of migration, although in lesser scales. Nevertheless, throughout the 20th century, German politicians maintained the official position that Germany was not a country of immigration until the end of that lasted till the end of the 20th century. As there was no official policy for the integration of migrants because they were considered temporal visitors who are not meant to become part of the German society. All the while, Germany's self-understanding as a nation was that of an ethno-cultural people, a community of descent that was restrictive towards non-German immigrants, but remarkably expansive towards ethnic Germans from Eastern Europe and Soviet Union. In another essay, Platican makes a historical excursus into the history of migration in Germany and identifies three distinct processes of immigration in Germany during the last 150 years and a type of ideological equivalence that was in operation. That means just as we have seen from the traditional societies how they value foreigners, then how was Germany perceiving the strangers in their midst. The first process corresponds with the era of the economic miracle we've mentioned between 1950s and 1970s when the temporary guest worker program was launched. This occurred almost simultaneously on both sides of the divide, Eastern Germany and Western Germany, as that's what it was called that time. So these migrants filled the labor gaps in the burgeoning industries, contributing to the state's economic output. Nevertheless, they were simply identified and valued as guests, Gastarbeiter, guests who had come merely to work and then to go back home. So their worth for the German society at large could only be measured quantitatively in reference to their contribution to the national economy, but not qualitatively. In other words, they were valued for being economically equivalent to the German laborers. Kastel also observed further that German policies conceived migrant workers as temporary units, temporary labor units, which could be recruited, utilized, and sent away again as employers required. Meanwhile, a similar program in the German Democratic Republic, that is the Eastern Germany, had additional political dimension. It was a socialist nation as at that time. So the contractual laborers, as the migrants were called, in the West, they were called guest workers. In the East, they were called contractual laborers. So these were workers recruited from nations who shared the same socialist ideology with the German Democratic Republic. The policy was intended as an exchange between states, precisely in the understanding that the contractual laborers would eventually return to apply what they have learned, their acquired skills in the development of their countries of origin. Hence, this model has both economic and political dimensions. And so contractual laborers in the German Democratic Republic were valued for their political economic equivalence to the indigenous counterparts. In both cases, therefore, migrants were not perceived as having the capacity to offer the German society at the socio-cultural level anything outside labor and economic equilibrium. So one could sum up that these evaluations in economic terms subscribe to the standard axioms of monetary market economics, which stipulates that monetized exchange transactions should not express any economically irrelevant characteristics of the exchange partners. So in both cases, the strangeness of the guest workers or the contractual laborers was exteriorized by transforming that into the equivalence between own people and strangers, conceptualized in economic terms. It could be deduced that the current valuation of strangers in foreigners in Germany, based on macroeconomic terms, has its roots in the European domination of world politics, and that distorts basic human instincts. On the contrary, effective integration policy requires a system that allows a relation of differences of identity within the nation state at the socio-cultural level. During the first decade of the second millennium, from the year 2000, the debate on national policy of integration continued to dominate national discourse in Germany, because the number of the generations of the guest workers were growing and they were settling down without, it was very clear that they have come to stay. So then came a turn of events under Chancellor Angela Merkel, who summoned integration summits that led to the creation of a national integration plan and the first government-endorsed definition of integration in 2005, which highlighted a non-assimilationist approach. It now defined it says as integration means integration into the social, economic, intellectual, cultural, and legal fabric of the host country without giving up one's own cultural identity. In 2010, the 2010 constitutional amendment finally then acknowledged Germany as a country of immigration and then set the stage for the current integration policy with great emphasis on language competence and labor mobility still. Since that time, Germany's integration policies have been growing and have been improving slowly. It's even ranked as one of the top 10 countries in the Migrant Integration Policy Index, what you will see on the screen, in 2015. Although during the last review in 2020, it lost some places and doesn't make the top 10 again. So with a score of 58, Germany is only halfway favorable to migrants, although her success in labor mobility was lauded as exceptional. As the slide shows, MIPEX uses 8 indicators for its ranking, representing the major dimensions of integration. One could also see that these rankings, that these indices are all based on the macroeconomic framework. But our concern is to evaluate how Nigerians perceive the success or failure of the integration policy and how they experience it. Now, Nigerians are known to be one of the countries with high rate of employment in Germany. They are hardworking, even the refugees among them, as the chart here shows, they are one of the highly ranked countries that always find something doing. So, but there is a clear dissonance between the expectations of the German migrants and those of the German society. It begins with the overall purpose of migration. Nigerians do not migrate only for economic purposes. It could be part of it, but there are other socio-economic, socio-cultural valuation of migration that come into play. And one could perceive this when in the discussion, in their narratives, and how they express their situation in Europe. Germany's integration policies target only those migrants, but there is some bit of problem because in capturing some of these things, because Germany's integration policy targets only those migrants that have perspective of long stay or permanent stay in the country. Even among the refugees, when they receive refugees, they organize integration courses for them. But those who are qualified for a state-sponsored integration course are those who are coming from countries that clearly have issues that qualify them for asylum according to the Geneva Convention. And these issues are wars and natural disasters and so on. So, and from the legal perspective, Nigeria does not qualify for that. And that's the problem most Nigerian refugees in Germany face, because they don't qualify for the sponsorship of the state for integration participation in the integration program. They must have to do it by themselves because they don't have perspective of staying. So they're not captured by that. Now, but what is important is that the Federal Ministry of Migration and Refugees, according to them, their integration policy is a core policy area in Germany and is considered as a tax for all society. They believe that integration is a service, but also requires migrants to commit to making efforts themselves, as it can only succeed as a mutual process. On paper, they acknowledge that it's this mutual process, but in practice, it seems that they tend more towards civil assimilation. So the core of my presentation is that while reviewing my notes, ethnographic fieldwork, notes for my ethnographic fieldwork, I began to see that this, we could hear from the statements of Nigerians that I interviewed, these cultural aspects of their migration journey that is playing out, especially those that does not, and some of these things form the problems that they encounter with regard to migration, with regard to their participation in the integration process in Germany. I will give a few examples, and that concerns what is popularly known as the myth of return. Was first proposed or first used by the sociologist Muhammad Anwar in a publication he made in 1979 in a book he published to describe how the early migrants from Pakistan to Britain intended to save up money for their eventual return in the homeland. And it is well known in migration studies. This myth of return is very popular. For instance, Rhodes writes that the first generation of migrants is usually characterized by transitoriness of mainly adventurous youths whose main preoccupation is to build up fortune and return to their homelands in record time. Now, my respondents' field work in 2009 in Essen. Essen is a city in Northern Westphalia of Germany. And it is a city of population of 580,000 thereabout, as at 2019. And within this population, we have 1,149 Nigerians. So they are very, when I say that they constitute a very small population, they don't make much of a critical mass. So of the general population. And here is the breakdown of the people living there as at that time. So we have males, females, most of them are single, the majority are single, or are living single. Then have those who are married, divorced, and widowed, and then people with unresolved status. This is important because eventually, I know that the question of representativeness will come. The Essen is not the city with the most constellation of Nigerian migrants in Germany. I know that. I'm not very sure Essen is. There are other places where, like in Frankfurt and Bremen, that are definitely more. But it was the location of my field work, and that is why I put it as a question. is something I'm talking, I will only sieve out things that are common that I could also compare to other areas. So back to the decision of the myth of return. The myth of return is that is common among first generation migrants, that they always have this fantasy that they will eventually go back one day. But what is very significant about that about the Nigerians is that this myth of return kind of push them into some sort of disjunctive lifestyles, because they seem to be neither here nor there. When you discuss with them, for instance, I have here 2 quotes as a representative of what I want the point I want to make, which says the Igbos or Nigerians love going home. It's in our upbringing. It's natural to us. Igbos love going home. Every Igbo person wants to be known at home, and he has achieved that he has achieved this or that. An Igbo man would not like to live overseas without doing something at home. He would lose face. So, and then, which is also buttressed by the other statement. The problem that comes with it is that many of them, it is common knowledge that many of Nigerian migrants, they invest, most of their investments are at home. The person will build, will get a car and do all those things and keep at home. But here in Germany, is living more like a fugitive. He will not have anything in his house, in his room, maybe using public transport and other. Not that he cannot afford it, but he's saving for home. And there have been so many conflicts of people who, after saving and they're thinking that they are building at home, they go back home and they see nothing. So, because of this impression that they are here for on a temporal basis, they do not participate actively in the integration process, or they lose interest in immersing themselves deeply in the integration process in Germany. One other one said that they don't have time to make friends with Germans and the Europeans because they are after getting married. Said integration is an individual affair. Some of us are married to German wives and have German girlfriends. Others have children who attend German schools and so on. For this category of people, there is a regular interaction with indigenous Germans so that their integration may be faster. But there are still some others who prefer not to mix up because they have more important things doing. Then related to this myth of return is reciprocal obligations, which makes them which is also a kind of distraction to the integration program. When I talk of reciprocal obligations, I talk of the traditional expectations of people, which I mentioned before, those marks of solidarity, that you take care of your siblings, you take care of your kins, and the support your hometown, and so on. Because of that, many of the Nigerians that come here, they face, they're more asked to or more preoccupied with making money that they could send home. Like Mark said, for most of us, the main aim of coming here is not that the life here is so sweet, it's too lonely here. But we would like to help our family back home because they don't have social amenities over there, and some of our siblings are poor. So that's the main reason that propelled many of us to go into this business. It's only one you can make some quick money from and help those back home improve their lives. Now, this one is working in a scrap yard. This is an informal kind of labor, because to qualify for labor, part of the integration program is that you have to get up to B1 of the language level, which takes time. It will take you at least 1 year to get to that level, to get that the language certificate that will qualify you for formal labor. But the advantage of having a formal labor is that you will now have some pension savings, and it will help also in your health insurance and so on. But then you pay taxes, and the taxes could be outrageous sometimes. So to circumvent that, many of our people go into some sort of black business, informal labor, where they will not pay others, but they will have cash at hand. But what do they do with this cash at hand? They are more interested in investing at home or helping fulfill their obligations at back home in Nigeria. Now we see the same trend also among refugees. When I worked with refugees, the refugees do not work, but they are entitled to social welfare from the government every month for their upkeep, for their feeding and other things, and pocket money, for instance. They will get, as at that time, they were getting like 300 euro per month. But you see these people that are, everybody's, the host society is pitying and helping. But from that, they're already saving and building places, building houses or investing back home. Then another incident that supports that is also what you see among married couples. They are entitled to child welfare, which they receive every month. They call it Kindergeld, child's money. It is used for taking care, is meant for taking care of every child that is born in Germany. But most Nigerian couples quarrel over that, and it's one of the reasons for breakups in marriages, because they struggle over this. They don't invest it in taking care of the children. They rather use it to boost their social status at home. Now that leads also to the next one on marriage and gender roles. Many of our people are fixated on the gender roles that they learned back home, which does not correspond with the understanding of gender roles in Germany. So, and it leads to a problem. And some of them even refuse to bring their child along. Like one of them, Denko, said, I decided not to bring my wife because it could lead to, I have seen how women, when they come, they begin to assume the powers that they are not used to at home, and they keep. So we know that when migrants come from contexts that are different from the host society where they are, there's always the tendency of having some problems. Now, in order to, I'm looking at the time. So in order to round up, the summary of what I'm trying to imply is that from a social anthropological perspective, migrants are fundamentally social beings and carriers of particular cultures. As such, their quotidian social interactions with people and institutions are influenced by their sociocultural background. That's why it's important to factor in the migrant micro-level social interaction and the ensuing cultural exchange, which is inevitable in the process. It is a necessary complement to officially recognized indices of integration. Effective social integration ought to be a process of give and take, mutual exchange between the host society and the immigrants. So from the narratives of Nigerians in Germany, from the people I've interacted with, and which is supported by evidence from other migrant communities around. It takes time. One needs to overcome some of these cultural givens, not really to overcome it, but to see how they could blend and how they could blend with the situation of the host country, and that is actually effective in integration. Because for any integration to be effective, there must be appreciable emphasis on these micro level of interactions. So I would say that, to return to the question, as a Nigerian migrant, my cultural background is not a hindrance, or should not be a hindrance, but an asset to my integration. One may therefore adapt the answer to the question as follows: when in Germany, do as the Germans do, but as a Nigerian. That is, improve the German culture with your Nigerian values and absorb as many German values as you can to enrich the Nigerian society. So if integration is a mutual process, a process of mutual exchange of cultural values, then migrants' cultural background, rather than being a hindrance, is a valuable resource and a catalyst to integration in the host society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. Thank you, thank you. I want to just make one or two comments before I open the space for others. I really appreciate the fact that you said the Nigerians are hardworking. I got that from that presentation, which I said naturally, when you leave home, you must know that east or west, home is the best, and you have to work hard to bring some money home to take care of those who need the Professor Kagbare's hand up. Prof.
Yeah. All right, Father. Thank you, Father Jofo, for this enlightenment and for your very nice presentation. I just want to ask, now, for ease of integration, what will you advise the intending Nigerian migrants to Germany?
Much, Dr. Father Eze. So I really enjoyed the presentation, and several issues raised are very important and educative. So I have a few questions. The first question is this. You mentioned the immigration policy in Germany, which also include the statement that Germany is not a country of immigrants. So from that premise, I'm asking this question, that which is a stronger hindrance to integration between culture of migrants and the immigration policy in Germany? So which is a stronger hindrance to integration between culture of migrants and the immigration policy in Germany? Then number two. Okay, thank you. The second question is, you did mention importance of language and labor market participation as important factors that enhances integration. Then when you gave the statistics on the characteristic of the immigrants, their employment status, gender, and what have you. So you did mention that a few of them were married. So that is prompting me to ask this question, that apart from language and labor market participation, did marriage contribute to integration between the immigrant and Germans? So because since integration is exchange of cultural values and what have you, and marriage is an important aspect of culture, which also could influence integration. So I'm asking that question. Is that part of your findings? And finally, sir, what is the ratio of men and women migrants that achieve integration through marriage to the Germans? So these are the three questions I have, which I believe is a contribution to the importance of your work, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Lazy people, like you said, they are hardworking. I said, but people have always said the Germans are very discriminative, that their own level of racism appears more than any other country. I don't know what you have to say about that, vis-a-vis integration, because when there's this very high level of racism, integration is going to be difficult for the people who migrated to Germany for one thing or the other. So what is your own experience and what do you have to say about this allegation about the Germans being highly discriminative, highly racist in nature? That is my own question or comment. Thank you very much. And now 3 of us have spoken. You can please provide the answers to these 3 people, then maybe more will come up after. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The first question was from Professor Kabare, and he asked about the ease of my advice to intending Nigerians who are intending to migrate to Germany. What advice that will help them have a ease of integration? My advice would be, first of all, that one will try to come through a legal means, and those legal ways of coming to Germany, especially from Nigeria, would be for studies. One can also come for business, but that of business, whatever way that is legal that you come, because if you come through legal means, the process of integration will be faster and easier, in the sense that you will have no restrictions concerning what you can do. There's no restriction of movement. There's no restriction of, you have access to all the amenities the society has to offer. And that is how you are able to integrate. Those who come as refugees, for instance, if you're a refugee, first of all, you have to stay at the refugee camp. Then after some time, some months, you may be posted to a place where you are now going to a community where you will stay pending the determination of the courts of your asylum application. And this can take years. And while living there, you are restricted from moving outside that region. So if you are found outside the region where you're posted, you are offending the law, and you could be punished for that, or even repatriated. So, and you cannot go to school. You cannot take up formal work as a refugee. So you see that the person is restricted as long as the asylum application lasts. You are more or less hanging. So, and that's what frustrates, the frustration that many Nigerian migrants face, because some will think that once you come, you will see how you can wangle your way out. If the person is lucky and is posted in a city, in a large city, then it is possible you could have some informal work, some black works you could do to gain money, to get money informally. But then it depends on what the person intends. That comes up about the same question: what's the intention of migration? So if it's just for you to leave Nigeria to wherever, then it's okay. But if you actually want to exercise your agency as a human being, to live worthy life as a human being, then it's always better to go through the legal means. Then when the person arrives, then the person has to open to new experiences, open to learn, open to experience how other people live. There are bound to be culture shocks. That one, you can't avoid that. But then in those shocks, you have that openness of mind. Then Akiwale referred to immigration policy and said, if Germany is not a country of immigration, then which one is a stronger hindrance to integration? Perhaps you didn't, you missed something when I was presenting. I gave that history of the evolution of the German national integration policy to show that it was a long way, it was a long walk to where we are today. Before 2002, or rather we could say before the year 2000, Germany has continued to maintain the official policy that it is not a country of immigration. And that's why I gave the instance that before then, all the foreigners that are here are seen as those who have come to work, contribute to the industrial development, and then go back home. They were not meant to remain permanently. So, but the reality began to show otherwise, because all those guest workers that were recruited in the 50s, now they are grandparents, they have brought their wives, they have their children, they have their grandchildren, who do not know any other country apart from Germany. So, and they are having a voice. And that led to the heated debate early 2000 until Germany now changed its laws. And now recognizes officially in 2005 that it has become a country of immigration. And that paved way to the designing of integration policies, national policy of integration, to help all those foreigners that are in Germany to become part of the society. But that's not to say that, that's what I also mentioned, that we also have to make a clear distinction between the legal provisions and the daily experience of the people. The legal provisions is that everybody is equal and people should not be discriminated against the other and so on. But then the concrete experience is that there are still places where people are excluded, but if they report to the authorities, those people who exclude them are penalized. Then you asked about, the second question was about the importance of language and labor mobility. And then you asked how does marriage contribute to integration? The emphasis, as I said, was on language and labor mobility. Those are the two planks of the German integration policy. And I also argued that that is deficient because labor and language competence and labor mobility alone does not suffice for social integration. It suffices for economic integration, but it does not suffice for social integration. Social integration means that one feels himself as part, identifies with this society, feels accepted, feels a sense of belonging. That does not come just because you are working or because you can speak the language. You can speak the language, but still you are excluded. And that's why I also mentioned at the beginning that the Nigerian or Africans from the sub-Saharan Africans, the blacks, are the typical, archetypical migrants. When they get integrated, then it means that the integration policy is working. By the time blacks feel that there are so many movements now about black Germans, is because of this experience of racism and exclusion, because of their skin color, that are galvanizing, forming pressure groups to push against that. So, but these are people who are born here. Some of them born from Black American soldiers that came as part of the Allied forces to help stop the Second World War, because they stayed here for decades. So before they left, some of them impregnated or rather got into relationships with German women and gave birth to half castes or so some people that are black. These people don't have any other country. They don't have any other language. They don't have any other. The only thing they have is Germany. But still, because of their skin color, they experience racism and all that, because they will look at them and they feel that they are foreigners, even though they don't. So they have always to explain themselves that they are not foreigners, that are Germans, and people will have. So that's what I made that critique, that language and labor, language competence and labor mobility, as important as they are, do not suffice for integration. Now, there are, I don't have actually the ratio of I don't, because you asked of the men and women, ratio of men and women, I think Nigerian men and women that have achieved integration through marriage. I don't have the this thing now. And from the, there's also a bit of a problem with getting statistics because of data protection laws. Because when in the official register, like when I wanted to get the data from ESN, because that when you look at that number, there are definitely more than 1,000, more than 1,500 Nigerians living in ESN, but not all of them are captured in that data, because when they get naturalized, they now move to the other data bank of Germans. But then they will still be distinguished as Germans with migration background. So, but some of these Germans, Nigerians that already have their German passports, within their self-representation is that they are Nigerians. So they will present to you as Nigerian, but you may not find them. They may not be represented in the data that you have there. So, but perhaps with, it could be possible to find out. So I don't have the exact ratio, but I know that there are many, there are many Germans, many blacks that are married to Germans and vice versa. But what I have is that there are, among sub-Saharan Africans, it is known that Cameroonian men are more, or the more Cameroonian men marry, what do you call it, married German women than other countries of Africa. But they do that because for them is one of the fastest ways to legalizing their stay. So that's the fact that I have. Then you asked also, okay, then the coordinator, Dr. Neto, has asked me about my personal experiences of racism in Germany and how that impacts on. So, yeah, Germany is known globally for a number of years to have be a racist country, but that has a historical background, especially what happened during the Nazi period. They still carry the emblem of Nazism around them in the world. I think it impacted on their global image, which they have been fighting to correct in recent years. Now, one thing with racism is a very complex issue, because racism has also to do with personal perception. It depends on how you see it. I may not be the right person to give an example of that, because perhaps I enjoy some bit of protection because of my vocation as a priest, and that I already have, because racism has also to do with power, asymmetry of power. So my being a priest places me at a more advantaged position than other Nigerian migrants, because I work in a parish, for instance. They come to me, ask me to do one thing or the other for them. So it already places me, so we could talk at a relatively plain level. But a migrant, a refugee, for instance, that doesn't have, that must have to go to beg for help, for assistance, depends on the assistance of the state to sustain himself or herself, who would definitely have a different power asymmetry. I think we see that also in our place in Nigeria, that the relation that this power asymmetry plays a role in how we evaluate others who are not related to us, or even those who are close to us. So personally, I have not. And I also mentioned about perception. Perception in the sense that if you are well informed, you could look beyond the facade and then tell yourself, that, okay, for instance, I give a special example. The first time I visited a kindergarten as I arrived, so it was in a place that had not been so much in contact with blacks. So a little child saw me and was all the time rubbing his hand on my skin and looking at it, to see if the black color is coming out. Maybe I painted myself or something. Now, for me, it was interesting. It was a thing. It was fun. I was seeing it that this person is curious. So, but otherwise, another person could have interpreted it as a racist behavior. But the child does not know. He's seeing it for the first time. He's seeing this strange figure and wants to know more. What is it? What happened to this? So, but if you have had certain experiences where you have been castigated for your skin color, and you have this experience already, and then you begin to have that kind of experience again, as somebody told you, you will definitely react differently. So that's my take on racism is real, and it is being discussed in Germany. It is being discussed on radio and television and all that. They call it Alltagsrassismus, because they have the legislation has taken care of official racism, that if you report, there are consequences. But these Alltagsrassismus, the daily racisms that happens at the informal level, where somebody could look down on you, or even pass comments, or even not passing comments, but giving you a kind of eye, and not because of where another, is something that the law cannot punish. It can only be changed by reorientation. And that is why in my presentation, I made mention of the cosmological dimension. That it is only at that point that this acceptance and interaction, integration can really happen, and it becomes enduring. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those responses. I mean, that was really nice. I don't know if there's any other person that would want to say one or two things before we close this interesting webinar. Any more?
Yes, coordinator, director.
Okay, Professor Badamu, our former Vice Chancellor, wants to say something. So, sir, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm very sorry I missed the first part of this presentation, because I was at an event.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, I tried to join. I tried to join, but I could not, because I was at an event. And I would like to thank the Reverend Father for a very wonderful talk. I only caught the last part of it. I really wish I were there, because the issue of integration is very, very interesting to me, particularly for migrants. I think the whole idea of somebody relocating from their own country of origin to another country should be ready to integrate and accept the values of another country. But if we do that, does that mean that we lose our own identity? You know, that's very, very interesting intersection, I think, between race, identity, culture, and migration. And I'm sure he treated it very well. So I just want to commend him for bringing attention to a very, very critical issue. I would have loved to know the experience of Turks in Germany. The Turks were also imported in Germany as migrants, but eventually they settled there, and I would have loved to know whether they have eventually integrated or not. But all in all, I think it's a very, very interesting and stimulating discussion, and the last bit that I caught was very good enough. So thank you very much, Thaddeus, for such a brilliant presentation. Thank you, and thank you, Coordinator, for allowing me to talk.
Thank you, sir, for your contributions. Thank you very much. It looks like I can't see any hand up again. If your hand is up, you can let me, or you can talk out and let me know. But if not, I want to really thank the presenter for a job well done. Yes, you can. You give us a last word. Yes. Okay. Maybe you should give us your comment to him. Then okay, take it from there. All right. You can respond to him.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Adamu, for your nice words. The talks in Germany, they have been actually very at the forefront of discussions on integration, because they constitute a critical mass of immigrants in Germany. and they are the largest and the longest staying. Well, it's difficult to say whether they have all successfully integrated because they keep coming. They keep bringing their words. And what is also significant about the Turkish community in Germany is because they represent also the Islamic community. So, and this double identity, Islam and foreign, made it very difficult for the integration. But they have made a very great inroad in integration. Many of them have studied here, working and doing well. I think the only area where there's still problem is what I have said. At the legal level, they are well integrated. But then at these sociocultural and cosmological level, there's still work to be done with the Turkish communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the presenter for today, Reverend Father Ejiofor, for a job well done. We appreciate you sharing your academic knowledge with us, and we hope to receive a full paper from this presentation to publish after peer review in our International Journal of Migration and Global Studies. You are very much appreciated. And I want to say a big thank you to all the people who were present in this platform, who made it interesting, and at least were able to contribute one or two things to this presentation. Thank you so much. And if the presenters to say a final word, you can say it while we call it a day. Can we hear a final word from the presenter, apart from asking questions, answering questions? Any final word from you?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. My final word is gratitude. I thank you all for making our time to rub minds, for us to rub minds together today. And I thank the coordinator, Dr. Neto, for being on my neck for some time now to make this day possible, and for the wonderful job you're doing at the Center of Excellence in Migration Studies. It's nice partnering with you, and I look forward to more collaborations also going forward. Thank you so much, and God bless you all.
Thank you very much. God bless you too for a wonderful job. Thank you one, thank you all. In a fortnight, we shall be having another wonderful presentation. Thank you, and I say bye-bye to everyone. Thank you for coming.